Hey, welcome back to the Positive Podcast. The host, Jeremy Todd. Glad you're tuning in. Coming live from the world headquarters in Fort Worth, Indiana. I tell you what, the weather is crappy outside. It's cold. It's brutal. It's terrible. And before I get into today's episode, I kind of tell you a little bit about a trip I'm going on. I can't wait. I'm actually flying to Vegas Friday morning to get out of the cold. I've never been to Vegas, and I'm scared to death of Vegas because of what Vegas offers. So I'm only going to do one day, and then I'm driving south to Flagstaff, going to check the mountains out. Then I'm going to Phoenix where it's nice and warm. And then I'm going to go to Albuquerque, see a buddy of mine. And I cannot wait to get that sun and get that vitamin D and get re-energized. Because, sometimes in life you get a little burned out. And especially this time of year, you get a little burned out because of the cold. And especially in the north, it's very, very gloomy. And it's tough. So sometimes you need a break. And my guest today, I'm going to bring Donnalynn Riley on here in just a second. We're going to talk about different things about that. She's a coach. She's a baller. She's full of energy. We're going to get into, really what it takes to get unstuck in life and really how to get to the next level. So Donnalynn, I ask you this. I'm in Indiana. It's cold. It's brutal. I don't feel like going anywhere. I don't feel like going outside. I don't feel like talking to anybody. I don't feel like doing a damn thing. What do you say to me, and how do you get me jacked up to get out of my funk?
I love that you think the answer is to get jacked up.
I got to.
I love that. So I am in Massachusetts, so I feel you. Like, it's cold, it's snowing. We're dealing with how do we get rid of the snow? It's too hard. And what's interesting about it is that a lot of times when people ask these kinds of questions of how do I feel better? Right? That's what it is, right? Yeah. There's all these different answers. There's oh, you should exercise, you should do this, you should do that, you should do the other thing. But the central element is that you're able to go within and to make the adjustment within, right? Because that's how our brain and our bodies work together, right? And so when our brain is saying, this is no fun, I'd rather stay in bed, all those good things that we do think sometimes, then it sends the signal to our bodies to make the chemicals, right? That go yeah, you should chill and watch some TV, all's well, right? Mm-hmm. You don't need to get out of bed. It's fine. Somebody will bring you some coffee or something eventually, right? So finding that way to really go within and do normally it's in the category of spiritual work, right? Sort of do the energetic work to be able to tap into yourself and say, what do I really like? Even if it's not in this moment, what can I tap into right now that could be far away, like the beach, right? Yeah. And what can I think about? And how can I control my mind and my body in order to get into a position where I do feel better? A lot of times people do use things like visualizations of places that they are not. The only trick is you have to not be sad about it, right?
Yeah, right.
You have to not be and I should be on that beach. Yeah. Right? So you can do things like use a doorknob, use anything really inanimate that you have no opinion about, and start thinking about all of the good things about it, right? So those are some ways to approach that.
Well, it makes a lot of sense because sometimes when I'm laying in bed and I don't want to get up because it's cold and terrible outside, I actually do that. I actually think about myself, okay, I'm going to give myself 2 minutes of what I have waiting for me is a cup of coffee. So I have something that gets me going. And a lot of times what happens is when I get going, there's no stopping me after that. So you bring up a very, very good point about the mindset. And one of the things that also gets in my way about, getting fired up and getting going is my ego. And I think that's one of the biggest things now in today's environment when we have these massive egos where we're trying to keep up and compare ourselves to other people. Because sometimes I'll get on my phone in the morning and get into social media and I see these guys that are already been up for 3 hours working out like monsters. And I'm like, man, heck with these guys. I can't do that. I can't be what they want to be. Do you have any techniques, or what would you say to someone that's battling the ego quite a bit? Because I think the ego right now is probably the strongest the ego's ever been ever. Because of those things, because of these visualizations that we have when we try and compare ourselves to other people, and our ego tells us, whether we can't do things or why we can do things. But a lot of times in my way, I'm just like, what, I'm not as good as that person. Again, the ego can be good or bad. And the ego for a lot of times tells me why I shouldn't be doing things and why I can't do things. How do you battle the ego? what are some exercises or maybe some things that you do early in the morning to get your day going, to get past that? And how do you work with the ego with your clients?
Wow, that's a big topic. Um,
Absolutely.
so first, I think I would say I would reframe it a little to move it away from a sort of a segment of the way of our being, right? The ego. And so I think I would dial it back just a little bit from that, because a lot of times what happens is we're comparing our insides to other people's outsides. Right. And so anytime you're in that scenario, you're in dangerous waters, right? Right.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking about like, well, they don't have a problem with that, but you have no idea what's going on in their mind. Right. And in fact, people do it even in businesses, right? They look at their competition and they say, well, that guy's making tons of money. And why am I not making as much money as they're making? Really? Are you looking at their bank account? Are you sure?
Yeah.
So, so there's a lot there where we kind of compare and say, why not me? And so the more you can let go of that moment and live in the moment, in this moment, then the easier it's going to be to sort of shift the thinking, right? Because really looking at the past, comparing yourself to your past or yourself to your future or anybody else's, right? Because that's what we're doing, is we're going outside of our brain and we're saying, oh, I think they think blah 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 of me, right? This is
Yeah.
one of the common things that people struggle with is confidence, right? Even very, very successful people really struggle with confidence, which is so interesting because they don't look like they struggle with confidence, right? They
Yeah.
look like, yeah, no, they got it on going on, right? But when you struggle with confidence, it's really about a reframing, right? Because confidence is something external to you, right? It's people looking at you and saying, oh, you are or are not. It's not about this moment and being present in this moment. So that is the first thing that I would talk about and work with people on, and that I do myself, is to really become present in the moment. And so I really I adore meditation. I do a lot of, personally, I do a lot of appreciation as well, because this is a cool planet. Have you noticed? Like, it
Super
has
cool.
air, yeah, and it has really good pillows.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
I mean, I can go on and on about the things that are right in my life. And if I can do that for just a little while. So I know I talk a lot, so you just
All
interrupt me.
good. No,
I'm
no, you
going
do
on
your
too
thing.
much. The thing is about your brain is that we have neural pathways, right? When our brain is having a thought, then the neurons are connecting in a very specific way. And if we want to have a new thought, then we're going to have to get the neurons to connect in a different way. So the problem with that is that we're fast, we're really fast, and our brains work kind of like superhighways. And so we've got these ruts that we've made already. We've already made the way to go really fast. We've made that by thinking the thought over and over again, or what we would normally call belief, right?
Yeah.
Or evidence. This is the other way that we sort of really dig in and get those superhighways going fast, is if you know it, you've seen it, I know that's true, right? Then once you're convinced, then that neural pathway is really locked in. So if you say, I want to think differently, right? I don't want to hate the snow. I don't want to hate the cold. I don't want to feel like
Yeah.
I'm tired of this nonsense
Yeah.
outside, right?
Oh yeah.
Then you're going to end up going down the dirt bike path for a while, right? Your brain is going to be like, I never had that thought before.
Yeah.
How am I
Yeah.
going to connect here, right? So the more that you can give space, give time, and give repetition to that new thought. I mean, we're choosing some really silly thoughts that are
Yeah.
they speak to quality of life, certainly. But in terms of business, you could have these thoughts about productivity. You could have these thoughts about how your customers behave. You could have thoughts that you'd like to change about how your the people that you work with you would wish they would treat you differently. You could even just have these thoughts about like, how hard is it for me to get a client? Right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the significant things that changes when people start working with me in their business is the amount of perceived effort. Right. So, so those are some of the things that I would do. I am a big meditator. I love meditating, and I like to do it multiple times a day. So, and I love different types of meditation. So I think there's a big door opening there.
Couple things I want to pull out of there. And I've never heard the ego comparing your insides to someone else's outsides. I just want to touch upon that real briefly. I just think that's so powerful, and it's so right. I mean, it's everything that's in your own head, and you're looking at these people drive fancy cars, or they're bigger, they're stronger, they're faster, they're better looking, and we're not comparing anything of the actual human being that we truly are. We're just comparing our ego to what we perceive as their reality and what their life is. And I think that so many people can pull so many things out of that, and understanding just how basic maybe that ego truly is. I mean, I know it's complicated at some point, but when you dumb it down to that, I'm comparing my insides to their exterior lives, and they may be a complete train wreck. You never know. So it's very, very powerful that you mentioned that. Another thing I want to talk a little bit about, you talked about the energies, and I got a question about energies. Oh no, actually, okay. Since I'm talking about energies, we'll talk about energies. Then I'm going to come back to talk about you said the dirt or the bike paths, right?
Dirt bike path. Yeah.
I'm gonna write that. I can't forget about this too, but when I talk about energies to people, sometimes I wig them out. Now my daughter is 11. She is, well, how do I explain my daughter? She is one of the most brilliant, smartest little girls. She's 11 years old, but what separates her from anybody that I ever met in my entire life is her ability to take on and read people's energies before that she even meets these people. She can see them coming from a mile away, and she'd be like, Dad, I don't like that person's energy, or I love that person's energy. Number one, I have my opinion. Is that real? Number one. Number two, how does somebody, I guess let's just start with that one. Number one, are energies real? Do you actually, is it, sometimes in this podcast I get a little woo, but I think there's so much truth to the energies of people. It's like when you walk into a room and you just feel the tension. There's nothing tangible that you can feel, but that's an energy that's in the room. So if you ask me if you can feel someone's energy, 100%, because you can feel a room's energy. And if someone's got that powerful of an energy, whether it be negative, whether it be positive, whether it be caring or hurt, you can feel these people's energies. So what's your take on energies? And I'm just curious more than anything, what do you think about reading people's energies, and are they real?
Yeah. So I think your daughter is spectacular.
She's I think, I don't know if the word's clairvoyant. I think she has this unique ability to be able to feel. I think some people are more tied into it than others. And I think one of the reasons, not to get too far off on tangent about energies again, but I think one of the reasons people are more tied into energies is the health of their actual being themselves. Because if you eat garbage food, if you're in terrible mental health, if you're, no disrespect for people that chain smoke cigarettes, but anytime you put poison in your body, I think you block some of these energy sensors that you actually have that are within the soul, and that sometimes you probably have them, but they're so blocked and clogged up with either negativity or poisons or whatever the case is. You fill in the blank of the negativity stuff there. But I think she's just so pure and so clean with her diet, with her energy level, with her food, with her water, with everything she does. Her energy levels our sensors are just on full blast. She can just take it all in, and she can read it and analyze it quicker than anybody. And most people, I mean, probably listen to this, are like, dude, whatever. But that is a fact. That is a fact, Jack, because she does it constantly all the time when we walk in the rooms. And I just trust her now. I mean, it doesn't happen very often, but it could be just a random room we walk in. Dad, I don't really like the energy of this place. Can we go somewhere else? 100%. I'm out. I don't even question it. You're right. I believe you. Let's go. And I think that is real. And I think we all have it, but I want to talk to you. What's your take on energies?
Right. So I think that, we're kind of riding the edge of where the physical sciences go, and we're into quantum physics here. Right.
Yeah.
And so, which I am 100% in on.
Yeah.
So I'm 100% in on it because A, it makes sense, and B, there are scientific experiments that are being done and that are becoming more and more accepted. And C, I have personal experience around it. So that's how we make our brainwaves go really fast like that, right? So I would say yes, trust her. Yes, I think it's fantastic that she trusts herself, that she looks within herself and says, does this match me or does this not match me? So one of the things that we know about brainwaves is that when we speak to one another, when we start conversation, this has been measured, it was a study in 2017, that when we speak to one another, we harmonize our brain waves. And so they did these experiments. They even made it so that we couldn't see each other, so that there was like, okay, well, at what point are we doing this, right? Are we doing it through our eyeballs or our ears, or where are we?
Yeah.
So we know that. And we also know that the things that we don't understand in scientific terms, typically 100 years from now, we have a better understanding of scientifically, right? So there's more to that story. So the same is true with heart energy, right? So your heart energy goes out into a space. It's a physically measured. I believe it's been measured up to about 25 feet away from you. And so there are all these things that we can't see that we kind of don't pay much attention to. So that raising awareness that you're talking about when you talk about putting poisons in the body and things like this, these are just ways that we ignore our body, right? That we say like, oh no, it doesn't bother me when I smoke. It's fine. Actually, I like it now, right?
Yeah.
Is just we've kind of cut off some of the awareness of what do our lungs feel like and what do our legs feel like and what do it, right? And so the more aware you are physically of your body, mentally of your thoughts, then the more aware you can be to your surrounding energies. Now, I'm going to say about your daughter that she is blessed and cursed, if you'll take those to mean something, a little bit easier than they sound. So a lot of times what happens, and this happens in normal business interactions, if you are a sensitive person, somebody who has some connection to the way that you feel around people, then you end up in very uncomfortable situations. And so often what we learn as little kids, because we kind of come in and we know all this stuff. We don't know it in our brains, but we know it in the way that we interact, right? We work in theta all the time. Our brains are going in theta all the time. We're in this creative space. We're sponging all the information in. So we're already kind of have a sense of like what energy is and how we feel. But when you grow up, now you're grown up, you're supposed to do things even when they feel terrible. And you go out into the world and you don't have any way to create separation between you and those other energies. Then it makes completing those tasks as adults really draining, really difficult. So right now she's in a position, which is really lovely, where she's honored in a spectacular way, right? And she says, I don't want to do it, and she doesn't have to do it. But at some point in her life demands things of us that is kind of unreasonable, right? You still have to go take the SATs, even if the room doesn't feel good, right?
Sure.
And so learning early on how to create that separation, how to create energetic boundaries so that you can really function in the world regardless of what's around you and not get damaged by it, not get knocked around by it, is really an important piece of that. So, lastly, I wanted to say, I mean, I talked earlier about having personal experience with it. And my personal experience with it is that I was a lot like your daughter. I understood things. I could tell things before they were going to happen.
Yeah.
I thought everybody behaved that way. I came from a family where it was totally normal and acceptable and not a problem. And, there were all sort of other people in my family that could tap in a similar way. And so when I got out into the world, it really freaked people out. They were
Sure.
like, "What is wrong with you? You can't be saying things like
Yeah.
that,"
Yeah.
And so, so learning those boundaries for other people and finding those safe spaces to allow yourself to be free and easy with the way that you think and full as your own person is really important for all of us, people who are super sensitive and people who are not, right? Because everybody likes to go home to their own home at night,
Sure. Yeah.
right? Yeah, to your
Yeah.
own safe space. Yeah.
It's interesting too with my daughter. She has these when she has dreams, she dreams in different colors, which I know is another thing that is unique. Most people dream. I think when you think about your dreams, a lot of them are in black and white, and her dreams are in color, which again, I think that separates her from a lot of the other people. But they're so vivid. She could tell you a dream 7 hours later and go step by step by step by step and tell you everything about it. It's the wildest thing. And obviously I just keep asking her questions. Well, then what happened? I mean, it's just like, it blows me away. And obviously that's a super encouragement. The other thing, which I'm not too concerned about her, she's got two brothers that just constantly beat her up and pound her, and she's strong as a bull. So that's the good thing about her, is that I'm not concerned. Well, long term, who knows? But the other thing that you mentioned was that she trusts herself. And I think being a woman and being a female in the society that we're in, I think it's harder for women nowadays to feel that trusting themselves and trusting their intuition, because they're pulled in so many different directions and so many different roles. Is it, the mother's got to have the dinner ready at the end of the day, and you got to be successful doing this. You got to be good. You got to be kind-hearted. You got to be caring. And women in general have it harder now than ever. And, the only reason I mentioned that is just because you mentioned that she trusts herself, and she does. And I think when we talk about ego and women being that powerful, as powerful they are, I think the women have the hardest job right now than anybody out there, because of those things I just mentioned. They got to be pretty. They got to be this. They got to be that. And it's a societal issue. And I just feel so bad for
Yeah.
women.
Yeah. People are going to have opinions about you,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they're going to
absolutely.
tell you more if you're a woman than if you're a man. They might
Correct.
still be having opinions about you if you're a man, but they are far less likely to actually tell you about it, right?
Yeah.
So people are going to have opinions, and they're going to say horrible things sometimes, and they're going to be mean, and life dings you around, right? And you're not wrong that she's going to have a system to deal with that. And as I think most women develop some sort of system, sometimes it's really works for them, and sometimes it really gets in their way, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But people are going to call you names. So if you know that at the end of the day, you are you, that you are tapped into what really feels right, and that you didn't let people guilt you, and that you didn't let people steer you in a direction because that's what they wanted and what was good for them, that you really made sure that you are 100% on your course, then you can get to the end of life and be happy about it. Right?
Absolutely.
That's the piece that we forget when we're in the middle, right? We think
Oh
like
yeah.
every little detail matters, and it matters which job I get, and it matters which, in what way I interact with people, and it matters which guy I marry, and all of that stuff. And of course, those things do matter. But
Yeah.
if they make up a life that you're enjoying living, then it is far more important than if they make up a life that looks good,
I couldn't agree more.
that satisfies everybody else.
Absolutely. Once again, we're speaking with Donnalynn Riley, coach, all around badass, helping people get unstuck in life. We talked a little bit about earlier about getting in that. I just wrote dirt bike
Oh,
path that we're talking about, right?
yeah.
It's interesting because when you were talking about that, I want to make sure I circle back to this, because it's selfishly is important to me to talk about, because I get in ruts. I get in and they're habit ruts. They're like, if I get off work on Monday night is a night that I go out and have a couple beers with the buddies, because that's something that's programmed in my head. And at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm already thinking, okay, are we going to go? What are we going to do? How am I going to get? I mean, it's like these, that doesn't serve me as an individual as getting better into the next level, but it's a rut that had been going down for year after year after year after year. What do you say to somebody to get them out of a negative rut? How do you replace that? Um, and I guess what would you recommend to someone that is when it comes to more of an addiction type? Because I think that's and again, addictions can be drug abuse, it could be alcoholism, it could be pornography, it could be any, I mean, a list of things, gambling, it could be a bunch of different things. What would you recommend or tell someone and help them direct them to get them out of that rut?
Yeah. So amped up into, right? So these little negative ruts that we're going through, amped up into addiction, really make the answers more obvious, right? So there are two ways that I know of to deal with addiction. One is to deal with the behavior and to have the behavior change, force you into finding a new way to think. It's very hard on you. And it is, but it satisfies a lot of people around you, right? So it makes people happy because they're like, oh, at least they're not drinking anymore. Oh, at least they're not, just sitting in their room smoking pot all the time, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is. So there's benefit to it. It's a rocky road and lots of people go on it, and it works. It does work, right? So you can manage it from the aspect of the behavior and go backward. The easier road is to manage it from the aspect of the thinking. So this requires the desire for it to change. So that's one thing. And as time goes on, you can build the belief that it can change, right? And it requires being willing to kind of stop trying to push the train in the opposite direction. So what I mean by that is, this is where meditation comes in, right? When you stop thought, when you find a way, and there are lots of different ways to do this. I have several that I really enjoy dealing with, but I would say that the first way that I would, when I actually, you know what, I'll give this one to you. This is really good.
All right, good.
When I first start working with people, one of my favorite meditations is called 30 breaths. So I developed this meditation specifically because it's enough time for you to get there. Okay. So the way it works is this: you breathe deeply in and out. Not so hard. Most people can do that. Breathe as deeply as you can in and out, deeply and easily, like that, right? And each time you breathe in, you count 1, 2, 3, right? The only thing is, when you lose count, you have to start over. And then you get to 30 breaths, right? And so that is an awesome way to bring yourself into a moment, to really quiet all the nonsense, right? Because a lot of times those super highways that have been built in negative thinking in general, you can say in an addict's mind, but there's a lot of physiology around that. So I'm going to sort of dial it back to say, anytime we have something negative, something we don't want in our lives, something that we know we do that doesn't actually make us feel better, that doesn't serve a purpose in our lives, either spiritually or in our work life or physically, right? There's just no good coming out of it. Then to be able to dial it back like that gives you a space, a new springboard, a new space to be able to say, oh, I will start from here in the silence that I just created to have a thought. So earlier we were talking about the superhighway and the dirt bike path. I grew up in the country, so I like that analogy, right? And my siblings were all raised in the city. I was raised in the country because I'm a little younger than them. And it's a real visual thing that you can understand that dirt bike paths are jaggedy, right? They are like all bumpy and you got to go around things. And so it gives you a really good visualization of what it takes to make that thought. And just about everybody has probably experienced this when you are walking down the road with your friend and you're having a conversation and you have to stop to say the next sentence. You can't keep going, right? Your mind literally cannot make your legs move forward and have that new thought. So that's how you know, oh, I have to slow down here.
Yeah.
There's some curves, there's some twists. I want to go someplace new. But then you have to practice it because your brain wants to go fast, right? So it will just kind of go down the jaggedy road for a minute and then it'll be like, whoop, let's go back. Oh, probably wrong. Everybody is no fun anyway, right? Or whatever it is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So my brain does that. My brain goes 4,000 million miles an hour constantly, never stops ever. But you're exactly right. The power of meditation has allowed me to process everything differently, my entire life differently, not just in that moment, but what I've gotten really good at meditation is processing different events that happen throughout the day. And then as they come up again, I handle them different because I process that situation in a slower mentality where I can actually figure out what happened and were my actions correct or not correct. But it's amazing what happens when the mind slows down. And I talk about this all the time in the podcast, is that I'm a big believer we already have all the answers within us. We just don't give us a chance to answer our own questions because we're going a million miles an hour. Once again, we're talking to Coach Donnalynn. Donna, one of the things about one of my favorite books of all time is John Maxwell's book, Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to rapid fire some questions at you. Have you read the book? Have you heard these questions before?
Probably.
Okay, great.
They're not part of my day-to-day life, so we'll see how I do.
I think you're going to ace them all. They're going to be a lot of fun. Again, these are all from John Maxwell's book, Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. Question number 1 for Donnalynn is, what is the greatest lesson you've ever learned?
Right. So this goes back to trust. Trust yourself. This goes back to, that is the absolute best lesson I ever learned. When I told you earlier that story about sort of going off in the world early in my life and understanding that I was in some way unacceptable to other people, it really rocked my trust in myself. Right. Yeah. And so rebuilding that, making that happen over time was really important for me, but you don't have to get knocked down that quite so hard every time. So developing and exercising that trust in yourself is really the thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, I mentioned at the end of every podcast, you have greatness within, and it's just a matter of trusting that greatness and allowing yourself to manifest the brilliant future that's right in front of you. Question number 2 is, what are you learning now?
I think that I would say what I'm learning now is about joy. It is about how really incredibly joyous life can be when you let it be. Now, when I say that, usually people are like, oh, you don't have my problems.
Of course.
Right? You don't have, dead people, and you don't have kids, and you don't have this, and you don't have that. Right. And I'm here to tell you, I have all of the things. I have all the things that make you not want to experience joy. But the more that I go within, that I find that quiet, that I find that peace, and then I allow it to grow into something in me before it even gets out into the world, that is really pleasant, really fun, really joyous, really playful. Then when I experience the world and life knocks me down, because life knocks you down, that's
sure.
Then you don't take the hit quite so hard, right? And those spaces in between the hits are really, really fun. So that's, I would say, what I am in the midst of.
Yeah, there's a great book by I think it's just called Joy. Maybe I'm totally butchering it, I'm sure, but it was by Desmond Tutu. and the Dalai Lama where they meet and they talk about joy, and that, what a great word too. How often do you use the word joy? I love that word. I'm very joyous today. It's like I don't know any people that use that word, but it's such a orchidaceous, beautiful word. I just love that word.
Yes, and it has such a feeling in your body, right? If you think about like when you feel joy, where do you feel it in your body and what does that feel
Oh, yeah.
like, right? It's like this very cool sort of, you feel it in your head and your heart, and just is a very
It
cool
is
word.
cool. It makes you feel, just makes you feel good. And that's what life's all about. It's making you feel good, right? Question number 3.
And it's a one-way ticket, my dad used to say,
There's no
right?
question
It's a
about that.
one-way ticket, so you might as well have fun.
Absolutely. Question number 3 is how has failure shaped your life? Questions are great.
So it's a really good question because I typically focus on the moments that are not failure, right? So I would say that failure has shaped my life in that a lot of times people want you to see the world a very specific way. And you get done with your, say, I'm going to go back to your daughter's age here because it's sort of a easier way for people to hear it and to talk about it.
Sure.
Your daughter goes to the ballet recital and she does her best, but she trips and falls. Then people are going to talk about that like it's a failure. And the thing about failure is that it requires that you are trying to jump through a hoop, that there is good and there is bad, and that you're sorting things into good and bad. And when you shift the focus just a little bit to enjoyable and not enjoyable, then it becomes a whole different game. Right. And so when your little dance teacher says to you, I don't care if your shoes fall off, just keep dancing. Right. Then you go like, oh, okay, life does happen. Failure does happen. Right. But you don't have to take it in quite so hard.
Yeah.
When I was very young, I did. If people didn't see me as the person that I thought I wanted to be, then I would go like, oh, gotta go take a left turn here, right?
Yeah.
And that would really get in my way. So early in my life, I was able to, one of the things that happened for me is when I was about 16 years old, I decided that I wanted to work on Broadway as a sound designer. And I was like, yep, that's what I'm going to do, because that's how teenagers are, right? They just know everything. They're all tapped in. They don't go in the rooms they want. And, they show up at the right place at the right time. And by the time I was about 18 years old, I was doing a show on Broadway. So it can go really fast, right? But along the way, there were not all successes there. I almost got fired from one job. The same guy who was my mentor and who was in that meeting with all those people who were, because I had screwed it up so badly, right?
Yeah.
That was the same guy that gave me my first job on Broadway, right? People will pull for you if you say, okay, how do I do it differently?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Super powerful.
Yeah.
Question number 4 is who do you know that I should know?
I do not know that.
Great. Think about it, because I got someone I want to tell you that I know that you should know. You said you live in Massachusetts, right?
Yeah.
We're in Massachusetts. My brother lives in Dedham. You live anywhere close to Dedham?
Far away. I live in the northwest corner in Berkshire County.
Okay. Well, you should know my brother. And the reason I say my brother is I think he's a borderline genius. He is a professor at Regis College and just outside of Boston, and he developed a master's program for occupational therapy. But he's just so much more than that. That he's just brilliant. I mean, just caring, funny, open-minded. So if you're ever in the Boston area, you need to remember to look up my brother. He is amazing, and I love him to death. I haven't seen him in a while, but if you're listening, brother Mike, much love. But that's who I know that you should know. He's the best. Flat out.
Well, I love that. And I am going to follow suit. Now, I have a lot of siblings, but I have a sibling that is for your daughter.
Okay, perfect.
Her name is Kathy, and she is an energy worker, and she understands energy in a way that is beyond most people, right?
Yeah,
Is sort of in that way that you just go like, well, I don't really understand it, but look, it's working. Right.
yeah, yeah.
And so that would be a great person specifically for you and your daughter.
Perfect. I love it. She, when you said that, like with her mindset with energy levels, it's just you just sit there and listen to her, and you're just like, I know you were telling me 100% the truth. I know this is reality to you. I just can't comprehend it, but it's so brilliant and so smart and so interesting to listen to people like that. So anytime I get a chance to listen to anybody that's like that, that is an energy worker or just has a different perspective or sees things in a different way, that I love just having those open-minded conversations and just listening, and taking away a little bit of this and taking a little bit of that, because it makes me a better listener, number one, but it also just gives me a different perspective of life, and then not to, everything's not linear. There's so many different levels to this life and so many different places we can go. And when you listen to people like that, it changes your perspective and just gives you a whole new view on life and how much more mysterious life is. And people like that blow me away. Question number 5, I believe, is what have you read that I should read?
Geez, was your audience going to see my bookshelf?
The ones watching can. I can. Absolutely. It looks good.
All those.
There's a lot of good ones up there. Which one do I got to pull away and which one do I got to read right away?
Okay. Well, so this is really interesting because when I recommend books, I recommend them really specifically for on your belief system, right?
Yeah.
So I could turn to you right now and say, gee, you should read the book that the Dalai Lama wrote, or you should read the book that that is Joel Osteen wrote, or from different belief systems. I think for this one, I'm going to go with Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote a book called Peace is Every Step. And this book is significant because it came into our lives, my life and my husband's life, in a time when things were hard. Things were really, really difficult. And it was a way to get from angst and worry and anger and all of the things that we experience, but in a very intense way, to something better. However, it has been a significant book to me to get from really pretty happy, really pretty fun, to even more joyous, right? So it meets you where you are and helps you to go where you want to go. So that's where I would start.
It's called Peace is Significant. Is that what you said?
Peace is every step.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know where I got significant from.
All
Peace
right.
is every step.
Every step.
That sounds super interesting. That's one book I've never heard of, and it's never been recommended on the show. So you win the award today. The best book I've ever heard. Woo-hoo! Congratulations. Question number 6 is, what have you done that I should do?
I decided to be happy. I think everybody should do that.
Yeah.
There was a point in my life where I took everything really seriously, and I was a big achiever. I loved achieving. Achieving was like, you got to get on Broadway, and then the next career you got to do something else, and you got to do something right. I was a big achiever, and in that way that you spoke about earlier, achieving as a female was really important to me, right? Being part of the founding members of the union that I was in, and all of these things were really important to me, and one of my goals when I was in my 20s was to be in books. I wanted to be in books. So by the time I was 30, I was in a couple books. I was like, okay, I'm good with that. Let me move on to the next thing, right? It was all about achieving. So to be able to sort of really be present and really be in this life and really remember that, like, that matters to everybody else. It matters. But doing it for the fun of it is the purpose.
Yeah. It's like
And that
when you're,
not taking it seriously doesn't mean that you won't get there. One of my
yeah,
favorite people in the world, lots of favorite people in the world, but my niece's husband has a brother. My niece's husband is brilliant. He's amazing. He takes everything very seriously, though. He thinks very hard about things. He considers exactly what to do next. His brother does none of the right things, right? He's like, kind of goes around. He has more fun than everybody else. He doesn't show up at the right time, you know?
yeah,
His life is working out perfectly, right?
yeah,
So remember that there's no prescribed way to do it better, right?
yeah.
Lining up is the important piece of it.
Well, I think you're exactly right. I mean, sometimes when you just choose to be happy instead of choosing to be successful, I'd rather choose to be happy, and the success comes even better. You enjoy it more. You're more present, like you said. You're more present, and man, that's when everything starts aligning. You can be successful as hell and be miserable as hell. I'd rather be happy as hell and let the successes come when I'm ready to be happy. I think that
Yeah.
makes that process. It seems like it makes way more sense to me.
Yeah. And when it hits the fan, you got to make that choice. You got to say to yourself, like, it does suck. So I can just feel like
Yeah.
this all the time and not know how to get out of it, or I can feel better and still not know how to get out of it.
Absolutely. Cheap plug for my book that I just wrote, that when I quit my 6-figure job and I was miserable, people are like, why are you quitting this job? This is crazy. You got this house and you got this going on. And I was miserable. Life sucked. So I quit and then hit the reset button, and allowed me to be the happy person I am now. And I feel like I'm happier now than I've ever been in my entire life, which it wasn't an easy journey, but it was that big step that you had to take. That sometimes that first step's probably the hardest step, but it's the best step too. So, uh, yeah, quick plug for the book. Make sure you go over to
Pays
jeremytodd.com and grab it.
dividends.
Yeah,
Happiness pays dividends.
yeah, absolutely, it does.
Yeah.
Final question for Donnalynn Riley. Donna, how can I add value to you?
Well, I think you already have. Having these uh, chances to sort of chew with other people, right? To get to talk about topics that are about how do I enjoy myself more, and how do I move forward more easily, and how do I take everybody else with me in that, right? How do I
Yeah,
make life better for other people? These are all the things we've been talking about today. And for me, this is the juice of life, right? This is the reason to be here, is to get to do this with other people. Because
yeah,
I could sit in my room and do it by myself and just think good thoughts, and that's great, but it's not nearly as electric. It's not
yeah,
nearly as you said earlier, amped up, right?
yeah.
As when we get to do this together. So you have already brought me great value. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's interesting. And what I'm thinking about when you're going over that is like years and years ago, before the quote unquote the internet was around, it was the having conversations with people across the country that I never met before is virtually impossible. And that's what's great about nowadays, is that you can actually reach out and have these conversations, which I agree. I love having these conversations. It's not like I can walk down the street here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and say, "Hey, let's talk about energy levels." It's just not going to happen. People are going to look at you like you got horns coming out of your head. But it's great when I can reach out to people like you and people like our buddy Brandon Hanley's been on the show a bunch of times. Much love, Brandon. Love that dude. But these are the
Yes,
people that I
indeed.
love talking to, and I love having these big conversations. So, Donnalynn, tell the people around the world where they can find you and where they can find more information about what you do.
Certainly. So I have a website they can go to at donnallynnriley.com. And it's super simple, just my name spelled out. And from there, you can find a really good Facebook community. You can find freebies that I'm always giving away. You can find different ways to work with me. You can find all sorts of information. So I have a blog, I have a video blog, I have all sorts of stuff there. So, and of course, a link to this podcast will be there, because
Absolutely.
I love to put the podcast appearances that I do on my website, so everybody can discover all these amazing podcasts that I've gotten to be on. So
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you saying that. We're going to get this message out to you soon. For everybody listening to around the world, make sure you go over to the YouTube as well. I've got a relatively new YouTube channel. Got 143 subscribers, blowing up. But I'd love for you to go over there and subscribe to us, because this is a great way to find this interview, and not only this one, but several other ones. Obviously, if you're listening to on iTunes, remember to leave those 5-star reviews. That allows other people to find the show. Hey, Facebook's going well. We got, I don't know, 12, 13,000 people on this Facebook page. Make sure you check us out there if you haven't. I'm not sure what you're doing if you haven't. Where have you been? Come on back, Jack. Get over there and let's connect on all these different platforms. Check out Donnalynn. Make sure you find her. And what's cool before we get out of the show is that I love it when I listen to a podcast about, I listen to a bunch of other podcasts as well, but sometimes you just connect with somebody and you're like, you know what? I'm going to reach out to that person tomorrow. And then, the time fades away. It's a law of diminishing intent. Like, you had this great idea, things go away. If this podcast reached out to you and Donnalynn connects with you, don't wait. Just run over there right now. Stop the podcast. Run over there. Connect with her. Connect with me. Connect with anybody you want. But do those connections when they come to you, because they come to you for a reason in a specific time in your life. And if you don't reach out to them, you don't know the opportunities that you're possibly missing. So I would encourage you to do that as well. Like I say in every single show, you've got greatness within. Like always, this is the positive side.